Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, please consider subscribing to the channel. Most of you listening are not currently subscribed, so take this opportunity to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a story. Thank you. This is a personal story that happened a few years ago when I was around 12 or 13 years old. I was staying in a hotel with my parents, aunt, uncle, and cousin who is a year older than me. One night, our parents went to get coffee together at a little cafe in the lobby of the hotel. The hotel was set up over several buildings with its hallway set up outside like a multi-story motel. The cafe my parents went to was several buildings away from the one we were staying in. However, this wasn't a problem for my cousin and me as the pool was just downstairs. At around 8 o'clock, we texted our parents on her flip phone, put on our bathing suits, and went downstairs to the pool. Initially, everything was fine. We swam around and caught up on things that happened at school, such as the boyfriends my cousin had broken up with, etc. Eventually, we ended up just quietly floating on our backs, watching the stars. Without looking over at my cousin, I said something like, "Wow, nice night, huh?" in a weird voice, hoping to earn a laugh. To my surprise, I heard a guy's chuckle. I sat up in the water quickly, my face growing red with embarrassment. I hadn't noticed that I had floated away from my cousin and was now next to some guy who was probably in his early 20s. He offered me a friendly glance and raised an eyebrow, saying, "Yeah, I guess it is." At 13, I was cripplingly shy, so I just gave a nervous laugh and hightailed it back over to my cousin, who promptly burst into laughter and started making fun of me, jokingly demanding if he was cute and if he really had laughed at the dumb voice I had made. I was too embarrassed to find the situation funny and stayed really close to her, not daring to glance back down to the other end of the pool where he was now sitting on the edge. While waiting in the pool, my cousin Lizzie and I were chatting about random things. However, she got progressively quieter and eventually playfully splashed me to get my attention. "Your new boyfriend is still watching us," she noted. Although she was still grinning, her voice didn't sound quite so teasing anymore. I glanced over to where she was looking, and sure enough, he was still sitting on the edge of the pool watching us. She splashed me again and said, "Dude, don't pay him any attention. You may not know much about guys, but I do, and the trick is just to ignore him." She wasn't exactly wrong. I was homeschooled and never talked to any guys older than I was. And in my eyes, she was an expert on worldly wisdom. I watched her face, mimicking her and playfully splashing back. "Maybe we should go get mom or your mom or something," I said, and she shook her head no. "Let's go back to the hotel room. I don't want my mom to freak out." That seemed like a good idea to both of us. Her mom was kind of terrifying when she was mad. "We can text her when we get up there." I nodded, moving and pushing myself out of the pool, grabbing her towels and shoes. She made some joke about what was going on, but I didn't hear it. The guy was standing up too, but he seemed to be pretty casual about getting his own things. When I looked back at her, her expression confirmed she had seen it, but she just kept putting on her shoes. I followed suit, walking close behind her. When she turned her head up towards the stairs, we began walking up them, both of us a little nervous but trusting it was just a coincidence. However, we heard footsteps behind us on the stairs. A brief glance down showed the same guy just a flight behind us, meeting my gaze with a little grin. He didn't seem high or drunk, at least from my sheltered perspective. I whispered to my cousin, letting her know the guy was right behind us. She started climbing the stairs faster, and I followed her lead. "I know, let's go to the wrong floor," she suggested, her voice strained with anxiety. "We can loop back around and go to our rooms. We'll call our moms once we get there." As a lover of mystery books, it seemed like the best option. So we got off the elevator 2 floors early and speed walked down the outdoor hallway, turning the corner as soon as we were out of sight. Lizzie grabbed my hand and started running, nearly pulling me off my feet. Up until that moment, I hadn't been genuinely scared, but her fear was contagious. I held onto her hand, keeping up the pace, as we heard footsteps that weren't ours echoing on the same floor we had chosen to loop around. We turned around the next corner, and then the next, breathlessly finding the stairs again and taking them two at a time. Lizzie let out a high-pitched squeal, dragging me along as I stumbled up the stairs and down the hall on her floor. She jammed the key into our room's door, pushed me inside, slammed the door shut, and drew the blinds as soon as we were in. As soon as the door was locked, she burst into tears, and I felt numb. She was crying from the adrenaline rush, and after she had calmed down, she wasted no time picking up the phone and trying to call her mom, who didn't answer. She then tried calling my mom, who also didn't have her phone on her at the time since I was only 12. We sat on the bed for what felt like hours, still wearing our wet bathing suits, hugging each other and shivering. Eventually, we calmed down and started offering each other rationalizations for what had happened. Maybe we had just coincidentally picked the same floor as that guy. Maybe he wasn't trying to follow us. When you're scared, it's easy to believe in coincidences. Feeling much calmer, we decided to do something really foolish. Go out to the car to get Lizzie's activity bag, filled with snacks and her Game Boy. It seemed like a good idea at the time, since we both thought it had been a coincidence, and we were both hungry. Wrapped in our towels, she grabbed her mom's keys and phone, and we made a plan. We would lock ourselves in the car if the guy came back, and call anyone we could think of. If he appeared while we were walking back, we would go to the lobby and find her parents. It seemed foolproof at the time, but in retrospect, it was a horror story waiting to happen. Nothing happened until we got to the parking lot in front of our building. That's when we heard a voice shout at us from one of the halls. "Hey girls, where do you think you're going, cuties?" I looked back and saw the creepy guy leaning on the rails on our floor. Lizzie let out an unearthly screech and grabbed my hand, dragging me along before I could get a better look. She yanked open the car door and dove inside as I stumbled after her, locking the car as soon as we were both inside. Once she caught her breath, Lizzie untangled herself from me and pulled herself into the back of the minivan. She motioned for me to follow, and I hunkered down with her between the seats. I had never noticed the sound of my own breathing before, but as we lay in dead silence, it seemed unbearably loud. Then came the tapping. I squeezed my eyes shut, not wanting to know what the man was doing outside the car. The sound was unmistakable, like he was drumming his fingers on the window. Lizzie pulled me tight, and we froze, hoping he wouldn't see us if we held still enough. I don't know how long we stayed there, frozen in terror. I wasn't sure what was worse: the darkness of keeping my eyes closed, or the thought of looking up and seeing him standing there. And just like that, he stopped. We stayed still for another 10 to 15 minutes. I started crying, scared to death. Lizzie began pushing me to sit up, and I realized what she was doing when I heard her dialing on the phone, leaving a message on each of our parents' voicemails. She didn't call 911. Maybe now that we're older, we would have, but at 13, 911 was reserved for house fires and murders, not for guys in their 20s following little girls to their car. How dumb. Eventually, we ran out of the car and back to the hotel, slamming and locking the door and falling into a sobbing heap inside. When our parents got back, they bemoaned not having had their cell phones on, and eventually convinced us that, though the guy was creepy, we hadn't been in any danger. I think they believed that was the truth, and honestly, it was what we all wanted to believe. Lizzie and I saw him a few times after that, mostly at night when he sat by the pool, and offered us a little grin every time we passed, but we were always with our parents until we left the hotel. When he saw us packing our bags and leaving with our parents, he offered us a forlorn little wave that no one but me saw, mouthing something to me. "See you later, cutie." I didn't tell my parents. It didn't seem worth it. It's not until now that I realize how creepy this guy really was, and while he could be just some harmless guy, he thought it was hilarious to follow preteen girls around a hotel. I'm glad I never saw him again. As a woman, upon reflection, I realize I made many mistakes and am horrified by my actions. However, it serves as a good warning to always be cautious and aware. I am typically a skeptical and aware person who immediately locks my car doors after entering, trusts my gut feelings, and refrains from talking on the phone while walking. Despite this, I was caught off guard last week while traveling for business to Phoenix and staying at an Embassy Suites hotel, where I have stayed numerous times without issue. I noticed that the hotel was lightly staffed, but did not think anything of it. At 6:45 a.m., my hotel room phone rang, and I answered, assuming it was the front desk. The person on the other end was extremely suave, charming, and disarming, but not in a slimy way. He asked if I was Jenny, and I confirmed, but could not hear him well over the TV in the background, so I muted it. He then apologized and asked if he was interrupting a meeting. I replied that it was just the TV and asked how I could assist him. He proceeded to tell me that it was a blast from the past and that I wouldn't believe who was calling. He was playful and friendly, like a long-lost friend reaching out. As I do a lot of work in Phoenix and have been doing so for many years, I changed my cell phone number about a year ago. Therefore, I was racking my brain trying to figure out who might have heard that I was in town and wanted to get in touch. Finally, I told him I didn't know who he was, and he would have to reveal his identity. He asked me to guess a city, and then proceeded to describe a wild encounter with someone he met in that city, but couldn't remember her name. I guessed Cleveland, a city I had visited for work 8 years ago, but didn't have any wild experience there. He insisted that it was Cleveland and asked if I had ever met a Cleveland Browns player and had a good time with him. I knew at this point that the call was not intended for me, so I firmly told him that he had the wrong Jenny. He then explained that he called the front desk and they must have given him the wrong room number. He proceeded to tell me about a woman he met in Cleveland 2 years ago, and they had an affair even though they were both married. He received a drunk text from her a few weeks ago and decided to call her to surprise her. He flirted with me and asked me if I was as pretty as I sounded. I foolishly told him my age, city of residence, and that I was married. He then asked me to tell him about my experience in Cleveland. It was creepy that he repeated, "Since I'll never meet you in person twice." At that point, I realized I needed to end the conversation and said I wouldn't continue. He promptly hung up. I had half an hour before I needed to leave and felt very uneasy as I thought about the call. How did he manage to get patched through to my room without knowing my full name? He must have requested to be connected to my name and made up a story about knowing the last name. Did he possibly know my room number? Was he lurking and waiting for me? I waited until I saw another woman go to the elevator and followed her out of my room so I wouldn't be alone at the front desk. I briefly told the manager about it to try to get to the bottom of how they got through to my room. Another woman standing nearby said that someone had called her room looking for Sarah Miller, and her name was Sarah. She had been asleep and disoriented, but remembered the call as the best wake-up call ever. The manager acknowledged receiving some calls but brushed it off and moved on to the next person, so I didn't get to the bottom of it. Reflecting on it later, I should have pushed much harder and may call to do so. The whole experience was pretty creepy. His disarming personality, the timing of the call, knowing my name, and getting me to acknowledge that I was alone were all unsettling. He also made me pick a city and then made a tie to it, pretending to be a cool football player even though he clearly wasn't. All kinds of creepy stuff. My question is, what was this man's intention? I can only come up with a couple of possibilities. First, he may have been trying to get someone to engage in phone sex with him for his own pleasure, but he didn't move in that direction quickly enough and wasn't explicit enough to make that seem like his goal. Second, I had the impression that he was attempting to find someone willing to meet him in person. If I had continued the conversation, it might have led to him saying something like, "Hey, I was trying to call Jenny Miller, but you sound really fun and cute. Would you like to meet for a drink?" Who knows what his or his friend's intentions would be? Kidnapping seems far-fetched, but it does happen. Perhaps he was just a lonely guy looking for a date. I tried Googling similar stories, but I didn't find anything except for the front desk scam, where scammers pretend to be the front desk and try to get your credit card number. I am typically very careful about personal security, so it's unsettling how easily I slipped into friendly mode instead of skeptical mode. My friends were shocked when I told them the story, and they said that if anyone were to fall for it, they would never have guessed it would be me. I'm still trying to determine what this man's intentions might have been. A few months ago, I went on a work trip to India and stayed at a luxurious 5-star hotel with some colleagues. One day after work, I went to the hotel gym and spent most of my time on the treadmill. During my workout, a middle-aged, greasy-looking Caucasian man caught my eye through the gym mirrors. At first, I didn't think much of it and continued my workout. When I finished, I started stretching and the man approached me, asking about my exercise routine. I gave him brief answers, and then I went for a swim in the hotel's outdoor pool. As a regular swimmer, I wore my usual Speedos, which were admittedly sometimes too small and tight. After about half an hour of swimming, I noticed the same man sitting in a nearby chair, staring intently at me and my package. He grinned and waved at me, which made me feel uneasy, so I quickly covered myself with a towel and left the pool area. As I was walking away, the man commented on my well-defined torso and winked at me, which made me feel even more uncomfortable. Later that evening, I went to the hotel bar to meet my colleagues for dinner and drinks. While I was reading the newspaper and enjoying a drink, someone slowly slid into the chair next to me. As I dropped the newspaper, I thought my colleague had joined me, but to my surprise, it was the same creepy guy. I felt taken aback and didn't know how to react. He stared at me and said, "Hey there, pretty boy." I struggled to keep myself from laughing because I found his pickup line ridiculous. He then asked me what I was drinking, and I politely declined, told him I wasn't interested, and waited for my friends. Fortunately, a colleague came and waved at me, and the creepy guy left and sat a few meters away from us. He continued to stare at me, as my colleagues found it amusing. After an hour, he left, and I enjoyed the rest of my evening with dinner and drinks. Later, when I returned to my room with a colleague, we saw the creepy guy lurking around my door. I presume he was shocked to see me with a friend, so he quickly darted away. That night, I felt a bit uneasy and took extra precautions by chain locking my door and blocking it with a chair. Luckily, I didn't hear any strange noises or knocks in the middle of the night. Every time I hear the words "pretty boy," I can't help but shudder. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and sharing it to support me. The best is yet to come.